Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt. I'm going to start us off. For those who can't see, this is my homemade eggnog. After my hot,
I hope there's rum. There sure as hell better be rum in there based on the news of the week.
You know, Matt, I don't drink.
Of course not. Neither do I, Bill. Neither.
I'm a son of temperance, Matt.
Me too. Don't touch the stuff myself. Also, don't smoke the wacky tobacco, and do not abuse any prescription medications.
You know, I now live 5 minutes from one of the only legal marijuana stores in the country, and even though it's legal where I am not partaking.
Well, as I've often said, Bill, you live the moral Christian life that very few Christians actually pull off. You're a mensch and a saint, and I'm going to go ahead and say it. Merry Christmas. I know it's not popular. We're saying it again. It's coming back.
Well, I think
some people find you don't have an objection, or you don't. I assume you don't resent people wishing you a Merry Christmas.
I don't resent it. I mean, we celebrate Christmas, we celebrate Hanukkah. I made also excellent Hanukkah donuts this year. If you want my Hanukkah donuts recipe, feel free to ping me on Twitter. That's more complicated. But I made spectacular donuts this year for Hanukkah. I do think that it is polite to say Happy Holidays to someone if you don't know what they celebrate. That should not be seen as offensive that you didn't start with Merry Christmas.
There we go. Here we go.
This is basic
Happy Holidays is what terrorists say, Bill.
If I walked up to you and said Happy Hanukkah, you'd be like, what are you talking about?
Number one, I might be a little confused. I would in no way be offended, and I would like to celebrate Hanukkah as a, albeit bad Christian, but as a Christian, I see the whole Jewish thing as part of, I'm down with Hanukkah. I would like to, I think, same thing with like Easter and Passover.
You should do what I do. Just as I celebrate Christmas in a totally Americanized, commercial, non-religious way. We do tree and a presents. There's no talk of Jesus on our Christmas. I celebrate Hanukkah by lighting the candles, making latkes, and making donuts. That's it. That's all. That's
the reason for the season, if nothing else. No, I think that. It's all good, and the 8 presents it doesn't hurt.
But I feel like I think the right has given up on the war on Christmas. Maybe because Bill O'Reilly got sent out to pasture, we're not doing war on Christmas so much anymore. It's now war on baby, it's cold outside. This is now the thing. Like the whole world is disintegrating around us. And you have
there's a Washington Post think piece out today by Julia Yaffe about how she's offended when people wish her a Merry Christmas. This is like the people who are upset if you were to hold a door for a lady. I can get the door myself. Look, I think this is someone who's not terribly happy with themselves. And so I would just wish everyone a Merry Christmas this time of year. And don't be offended by it. If you're, wish me a Happy Hanukkah, Kwanzaa. I'm down with Kwanzaa. I'm not going to be offended by it.
I know anything smacking political correctness is like, top 5 trigger for Matt Lewis.
And I don't trigger easy, but my buttons. You know the buttons to push. The other thing I would say, since you referenced it, I just had John Podhoretz on, who I argue has done, next to Jesus and Irving Berlin, is the greatest defender of Christmas from the Jewish faith of anyone I know. And J-Pod has taken umbrage at the progressive scolds who are out to destroy Christmas. The irony, of course, is that if social conservatives defend "Baby, It's Cold Outside," I agree that the outrage against the song is overwrought. Like, I don't really think the song is about date rape, as some people believe. But the irony is that if Christian conservatives are defending a secular song about getting drunk and hooking up, that is sort of telling in regards to where things have gone.
It does capture the state of the conservative movement.
It does. It's a microcosm of a larger point. But anyway.
So here we are. So it's Friday morning. It's Friday morning. We are unfortunately taping before we know what happens with the shutdown, because the deadline is midnight tonight. And I want to be very clear, partial shutdown, not the entirety of the government, because Congress did pass several bills in September that keep certain agencies funded through, I forget it's through 2019. I think it's 2019, through September 2019. And we talked a bit about this last show, coming out of the infamous Chuck and Nancy meeting where Trump bragged that he'd be proud to do a shutdown. And I wrote a column on Monday about this. And sometimes we talk and we plug our columns, and sometimes we talk and they give us ideas for columns.
Yes.
So forgive me if I'm covering ground from last week, but I do think there's stuff to add. I think the things that I said that I didn't say last week.
No, but I think this is also like at the beginning of a new Rocky movie where they'll show some clips from last week's not last week's episode, right, but from the previous sequel.
Right.
This is helpful even for regular viewers who listen to this show religiously. And by the way, we did get a tweet from someone who was upset that we never got into the James Buchanan story. And that's
the lost conversation swallowed by technology. Someday,
so you're just gonna have to
maybe like the last show,
literally the last show ever.
Right. So you argued last week that Trump won the argument with Chuck and Nancy because he planted his flag, he rallied the base. He made it about border security, and that makes his base happy. And my argument going back to last year was shutdowns are always the losing side. Whoever provokes a shutdown always loses in public opinion. And Trump has now made it clear there is a shutdown that is 100% on him. But the fact that his base is going to love it means that once one happens, and I was saying it's highly likely one is going to happen, it's going to last for a long time, because the typical shutdown cycle is a Newt Gingrich or Ted Cruz gets all excited, I'm going to shut down the government and show that the public is with me, and then the polls come in and you find out that they're not, and you have to climb down and surrender and capitulate and get nothing of what you wanted. This time, assuming it does happen, what poll is going to make Trump change his mind? As long as Rush Limbaugh and Ann Coulter, etc., are happy, who cares if he's losing 60-40 or 65-35 in the polls to him? And so if it's only going to end if you can actually override his veto. I mean, he is a one-man shutdown right now, and if it gets to that point, which all indications say that it is, it's going to be incumbent on not just McConnell, but Kevin McCarthy. Kevin McCarthy's going to have to figure out, how do I get 70 plus?
Our fate, if the fate of the Republic is now resting, if we turn our lonely eyes to Kevin McCarthy, God help us. So a couple things. One, I want to make a distinction. I wrote a column about that meeting, and I think as a snapshot, Donald Trump did win that meeting. I think that Chuck and Nancy kind of looked weak. I think Trump looked authoritative and in control. I don't buy the argument that they baited him into something. Now, I will say part of my premise was that if Trump decided to cave and avert a shutdown, he would have ironically have been aided by the fact that he was so tough rhetorically in standing up to Chuck and Nancy. In other words, members of the base would be like, he sure told them that we're going to get the wall. Then he folds. We go into Christmas holiday. Trump goes to Mar-a-Lago. The base is happy. They're appeased. In other words, they've traded the tough talk for actually substantive action. Instead, what happened is Ann Coulter and Rush Limbaugh and some others, and I think Ann Coulter was by far the most important person in terms of influencing Trump. And I have a piece at the Daily Beast today where I actually juxtapose who's Trump listening to. And on one hand, I juxtapose Ann Coulter, who warned him to change his mind about keeping the government open, and he listened. And James Mattis, a 4-star retired Marine general and his Secretary of Defense, who warned him against retreating from Syria, whom he ignored. So you've got two people, both representing wings of the conservative movement and the Republican Party, warning him that he's doing something that is going to be a mistake, that could cause him base problems. And he chooses to listen to Ann Coulter and heed her advice and her warning. And he chooses to ignore James Mattis. And I think at the end of the day, Bill, it comes down to what you were suggesting. He is in base mode. It's all about pleasing his base, no matter how small that may be, because that's what he needs to weather the storms of scandal and investigation and possibly impeachment. The last thing I'll say, Bill, is I don't know how this ends, and you create a scenario where this may linger on indefinitely. Trump right now is trying to push Mitch McConnell to use the nuclear option so that he can, so as we tape this on a Friday, yesterday the House, and things are going to be moving quickly, yesterday the House passed the spending bill that included the $5 billion to fund Trump's border wall. The Senate, I think, needs 60 votes unless they use the nuclear option, which would end the legislative filibuster. Mitch McConnell is obviously reticent to do that for obvious reasons, that it will be used against him someday. But Donald Trump is urging Republicans to do that. That's where we are.
I mean, I think there are very few things that Mitch McConnell has principles about. But I think
but let me just say, I think I have more. I'll just say I think I probably have more respect and admiration for Cocaine Mitch than you do, Bill Scher.
But it's because he gets done when he wants to get done most of the time, and
he's our Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah. But I do think he is very serious about. I think one, he knows what it's like to be in the minority. And having the filibuster was very useful to him. I mean, he spent more time in the minority than the majority, and I think he is thinking beyond his own career, thinking, Republicans will be in the minority again, and you're going to want that weapon in your toolkit. So I think he's very serious about keeping the filibuster. He also hates shutdowns. I mean, if there's going to be something where Mitch McConnell would be like, okay, I got to suck it up here and get rid of the filibuster, it's not going to be to stop a shutdown threat, because he thinks shutdowns are stupid. It's why would he...
Keep in mind also, Bill, the Senate passed a stopgap continuing resolution that would have kept the government open. I have to assume that Mitch McConnell did that having been given Donald Trump's word that he would sign the bill, right? Would Mitch McConnell have passed that continuing resolution?
He might have tried to box him in. He might have done without a commitment. He might have said, I'm going to force the issue.
I'd be curious to know whether, and we may never know, I'd be curious to know if Trump had promised to sign that bill or if this was McConnell being proactive.
Right. I mean, I know in Politico that just various people in the White House have been giving mixed messages all week. And McConnell was up against the clock. So at some point you got to say, look, I got to pass something here, or else we run out of time. I don't know. I have no idea what private conversations that they've had, but I would not be shocked if he didn't have an ironclad commitment. I also wouldn't be shocked if Trump said, sure, I'll sign it, and then backstabbed him. I think it could totally be true. But I will go just to what I was saying before. I mean, maybe McConnell, because he hates shutdowns so much, would get rid of the filibuster because I hate shutdowns. But I think more likely he's going to be, I'm not going to sacrifice something that I think is really important based on your petulancy. And I'm convinced that I will convince Republicans of this error in due course, as I have in the past.
Well, look, if McConnell goes nuclear here at Christmas, got to throw that in, and ends the shutdown and ends the legislative filibuster, that is a game changer. That means that, if you're a Republican, when there's a Democratic president and a Democratic Senate, it's a game changer.
If you were going to do that, you would have done it, January 22nd, 2017, when you had control of both houses of Congress and you wanted to ram a lot of stuff through Congress. You do it now. Okay, you keep the government open for less than a year, and all your legislation gets killed in the House. It makes no sense.
It makes no sense, except if you were Donald Trump and the one campaign promise that clearly, based on the, again, perfectly okay, not perfectly okay, but Donald Trump is willing to retreat from Syria, throw the Kurds under the bus, appease Vladimir Putin, and give the potential for safe haven to ISIS, just as Barack Obama did when he withdrew from Iraq and did not leave a small reserve force behind. That's a lesson I thought we learned, at least that Republicans had learned. Trump's okay with that.
Why would you ever thought that Trump learned that lesson? Trump has never indicated that he learned that lesson.
But the big thing is obviously the wall. This cannot be, we cannot abide Donald Trump not fulfilling his read my lips promise. He's going to build a big, beautiful wall. It's just going to get higher. There's going to be a moat maybe around it. I don't know. This is apparently Donald Trump's, he said he's going to build a wall, and if he doesn't do it, it's a failed presidency. I think that's how he sold it, and he's being held to it now by people like Ann Coulter and Rush Limbaugh and Laura Ingraham. So Trump feels like this is his last chance. This is the last chance. And the only way it's going to happen, probably, is if Mitch McConnell goes nuclear. And if McConnell doesn't go nuclear, doesn't that set up the blame where McConnell is the GOAT?
Oh, I think Trump wants the fight more than the wall. He doesn't want his base to think he's the one that capitulated. He's the one that was weak. I think it's perfectly fine not having the wall and blaming somebody else and staying in fight mode. And typically, Republicans have cowered in the wake of that. They have not wanted to get crosswise with Trump's base and have bent over backwards to accommodate him, even when he's doing things that violate their principles or their sensibilities. And I think up until this point, McConnell and Paul Ryan really didn't want shutdowns. And they knew the midterms were coming up. They knew what a disaster it would be to have a shutdown right before midterm. You can tell me all day long how the 2013 shutdown meant Republicans won the 2014 midterms, but the point is...
look, I agree it hurt. I have always said that it hurt them, and I think the daily tracking polls show that Republicans were...
You never were one to say that the shutdown...
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about me, because my argument is that it was so far out that it cost them the Virginia gubernatorial race, but it didn't impact the midterm.
No, this is more of others who believe that was the secret to winning the 2014 midterms. The point is, they didn't have one in 2014. They realized it was stupid, and they stopped doing it.
Those people are idiots who think that it.
Trump's been threatening shutdown since 2017. Since May of 2017, Trump has periodically said, we need a good shutdown. We need a good shutdown. And it's always been for border security, always been for the wall. And he threatened it several times in 2018. And every time both parties have come together to box him in so he doesn't actually do it.
Yeah.
And come September of this year, McConnell and Ryan they send Trump several appropriations bills through regular order that, one, adhere to his priorities. So bills that involve defense spending, veteran spending, maintaining the nuclear arsenal, those kinds of things get funded through September of 2019. And so when you do the nuclear arsenal, it's the Energy Department. And the Energy Department bill also involves other things as well, because it's not just one narrow thing. So there's so 3/4 of government is fully funded through this fiscal year.
Right.
Now, there's some critical things that don't meet that. So they go back. So they attach to those bills, or one of those bills, a provision to extend the rest of government through December, which is why we are where we are today, but it gets you past the midterm. And so they tied that piece to the military spending. Trump presumably says, I can't veto military spending before the midterm. So fine, Mitch and Paul, you win. We'll save us for another day. They can't do that now. There's no midterm on the horizon that Mitch can beg and plead for Trump, hey, please don't do this.
But Trump was fine with kicking the can down the road a couple more months until Ann Coulter. And I think because she sees that once Democrats officially take the House, then the dream of the wall is over, right? But Trump was okay with it.
I wonder, I don't know this, I don't know if he's thinking this, I don't know if Trump was trying to play chess here or not. But I wonder if Trump and McConnell were thinking, look, we're going to have this fight at some point. Let's have it in February when it's Speaker Pelosi, and we can at least try to pin some of this blame on her. Don't do it now before Christmas when we run everything and there's no way you're going to be able to shift the blame.
But as a consequence, Mitch McConnell now is going to be blamed. And let's think about this for a second. Mitch McConnell has spent at least the last decade being viewed by conservatives as a RINO weak sellout. Within the past year, his reputation, or couple years, his reputation has changed. He's now Cocaine Mitch.
I love saying that.
I love freaking saying that. I want one of those T-shirts. I desperately want a cocaine. Remember, it started with the "Come at Me, Bro" posters or whatever that popped up during his re-election bid a few years ago. That's when he started getting. That's when he got his groove back. That's when Mitch.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg carries her tote bag with Notorious RBG on it. You need to get McConnell like Cocaine Mitch gear that he wears around the Capitol.
Well, there is gear. I don't think he wears it, but he should. It's sort of like wearing your own like rock band T-shirt. Right. I think it's seen as unseemly or uncouth or something. But I would, like, I proudly wear Matt Lewis and the Mob T-shirts. And anyway, I guess my point now is that, number one, Mitch McConnell is arguably the most effective Republican in America today, if you care about passing conservative policy and judges specifically. How's he going to feel about what he is now being set up as is the patsy to be blamed for stopping the most important conservative, nationalist, populist policy, for stopping Donald Trump's number one campaign promise. Mitch McConnell is about to be blamed for that. How's he going to feel about that? And don't forget, he's also up for re-election in 2020.
So he only would care if he invited a primary challenge. Now, he had one 6 years ago, or say 4 years ago.
That guy's now the governor.
That guy's now the governor, but McConnell beat him pretty soundly, and he got a second act, but McConnell won. So I don't know how afraid McConnell is, if he feels like he's really vulnerable in Kentucky or not. But I do agree with you that because, one, Trump was so defiant and definitive last week, and because Coulter and Rush Limbaugh, et cetera, are not patient and didn't believe if you waited 2 months you could have had the fight then, they forced Trump's hand, where now Trump feels like, I really feel like I need to do this now. And maybe Trump was always there. Who knows? But
well, in fairness to Coulter, whom I've been very critical of, and again, my piece in the Daily Beast juxtaposes how Donald Trump was more than willing to ignore the advice of General Mattis and his warnings, but was not willing to ignore the warnings and advice coming from Ann Coulter, which I think is a stark contrast. And I'm pretty proud of that column, actually.
Now, there may be interplay here between the two things. Now, often things aren't connected. People in politics compartmentalize, and you think that a loss here is going to lead to a cascading effect, and there'll be losses in other things, but you find that there's momentum is all perception, and people can pivot and do something else on a different track. But if this Mattis moment has really rocked the more establishment Republicans and the Republicans who are not running for re-election in 2020, particularly in the Senate, how committed are they to stick with Trump at this point? They've already lost the House. They probably don't feel very good about Trump's prospects in 2020. And many might be counting the days till he's gone. And they can try to get back to normal themselves as a party. So if you're already like, man, if Trump's going to be a left-wing lunatic pulling out of Syria and handing Syria to Putin, and again, that's not my assessment of it, but in the mindset of a conservative Republican, if Trump's going to be like that, I'm going to bend over backwards here and have a 6-month shutdown. We're going to get killed in the polls. I'm going to get killed in the swing of the country so I can satisfy his base. What's the point of doing that?
Well, look, so what I was about to say is, in fairness to Coulter, if you really want the wall and you really see the wall as the most important thing and the reason you voted for Trump, I guess you do have to throw a fit right now before Democrats officially take over the House. But let's just talk. I want to step back for a second and talk about the culmination of events that we are seeing happening right now, right? So we've got the Mueller thing. The Mueller investigation goes on. We won't even get into that, but all the people, the Flynn's, the Manaforts, you go through the Roger Stones, you go through the list, right? Then you've got the shutdown, which we spent the last half hour, and we've just scratched the surface, but the shutdown at Christmas time, and I think the only way Trump gets the wall is if you end the legislative filibuster, which is I believe, a huge, huge deal. Then you've got the retreat from Syria, which I believe is a huge mistake if you care about all sorts of things, keeping your word, defending your allies, preventing the rise of radical Islamists. But putting that aside, Mattis leaving over it is also part of a larger trend, right? We're also losing John Kelly as chief of staff. There has been a brain drain, essentially an out-migration, and I even include Jeff Sessions. I'm not a big fan of Jeff Sessions as a senator, but at least this was a guy who had a certain amount of intellectual honesty and integrity as he saw the world. Those people are leaving. We're getting, after 2 years, we're getting a second Trump administration full of people who are not 4-star Marine generals, who are not going to have the gravitas to say, I'm recusing myself, whether you like it or not. That's a huge story. Now, let me just quickly say a couple of other weird things happening. There was a criminal justice reform, which I think a lot of conservatives think was a good idea, but Rubio was against it, Ben Sasse was against it, Tom Cotton was against it. So that's divisive. That's got some weird strain on the base. There was a banning of bump stocks, which generally unnoticed. I don't even think the NRA has weighed in on, as far as I know, but obviously we are entering into this very crazy time. Bill, you and I were going to, here's my dream, what I always want is to ease into, I'll say it, ease into Christmas time. I want to phone in my columns. I want to have boozy, long lunches at the Palm with Jamie Weinstein. I want to just play best of Matt Lewis podcasts. And I want the DMZ, instead of talking about apocalyptic stuff happening, I thought we were going to have we were going to have a very special DMZ. What did we get wrong this year? Or what lessons did we, some sort of...
You still make some time.
Well, I don't think we're going to... I think that...
I'm talking about what I got right this year, whether you like it or not.
Well, I'm going to do an airing of the grievances if you're going to do that. Okay. Anyway, I've filibustered. No pun intended. Go ahead.
Oh, are we shifting to what I got right this year, or do you want to talk about Mattis?
All right. Before we shift... I do want to linger on the one point I made, which is I feel like there's the adults, to the degree that there were adults supervising Trump, they weren't perfect. God knows they were not perfect, but we also do not know the things he would have done had they not been around. They're gone. They're leaving. How important is that?
I don't know. We'll see in the next 2 years if this actually wasn't rock bottom and it actually gets worse from here. If there are various little things that they did that actually were sticking fingers in a dike that were useful. I think on the whole, the adults in the room didn't adult all that well, and that's not their fault. It's that they have a man-child as president. So I'm not crying their loss in that respect. But I do think, particularly the Syria decision and the Mattis resignation in its aftermath, I do wonder how serious a rupture this creates within the Republican Party. We've talked endlessly about the tension between, Trump Republicans and established Republicans and national security Republicans, and it's always been that these quote-unquote never-Trumpers are minuscule in number and certainly in influence, and this is Trump's party and all that kind of stuff. And I'm intently fascinated with the question of what's going to happen with the Republican Party post-Trump. There's going to be a post-Trump, whether it's in 2 years or 6 years, there will be a post-Trump. And how much has Trump changed the fundamental DNA of the party that when he goes, it's still Trump-like? Or is this going to be an aberration, and once he goes, it snaps back to normal? Or maybe somewhere in between those 2 points? And Lindsey Graham, who has been a total Trump sycophant since McCain died.
90%.
This
90%.
This guy,
not total.
And I don't want to. I'm not as mean to Graham as some others on the left because I get the game. I get that he is always doing this dance to keep his base happy in South Carolina, so when he does break ranks, he can get away with it. So I accept that there's inherent intellectual inconsistency with that political approach and if he wasn't doing it, someone worse would probably be in there. So from a liberal moderate standpoint, not just
that.
So I don't.
I think from a scene, yeah. I think it also. I think you're probably right about him representing South Carolina and having to be cognizant of the political calculations. But I also think that he has decided that this game, I think he thinks this game is good for America because he needs to have influence with Trump when it matters. And the only way he can have any influence with Trump when it matters is to basically humiliate himself.
Right. But he doesn't. This is what the Syria decision proves.
Yeah.
He doesn't have that. He's never had that influence. He certainly doesn't have it now. I I do. I mean, I can't get inside his head. I suspect he is primarily motivated with trying to keep his seat and stay in the Senate. So I think he likes being in the mix of things. He doesn't want to give that up.
Was Lindsey Graham involved? Remember, there was a time. This proves your point, Bill. There was a time when Chuck and Nancy agreed to fund a border wall in exchange for the dream.
Well,
for
Chuck,
Doc, right? As memory serves, Lindsey Graham was helping broker that deal, and Stephen Miller. Am I right about this? Stephen Miller got involved.
That's my understanding.
And effed it up.
Yeah.
And Trump could have had his wall.
Right. And so Graham, I mean, Graham has always sounded hardline on immigration at certain times so he could maintain his viability to broker a larger immigration reform deal. I mean, he voted for Obama's immigration bill. He ran for president on the premise that Republicans could not sustain as a white-only party. It had to win Latino votes, and it needed to be on the right side of immigration reform. I believe that is where Graham's heart lies. But in the past few months, he has sounded like a raving lunatic on immigration and the wall and child separations and whatnot. And again, I'm sure it's wholly disingenuous to maintain his position in the party. But my point is that he has sounded much more hardline on that since McCain died, and maybe that's coincidental.
It does seem, but it seems to be certainly a correlation,
right?
If not causation.
And while that was going on, he was clearly mad at Saudi Arabia for the Khashoggi murder, but he was always stopping short of blaming Trump for it, and trying to say, "Oh, I'm sure Trump's going to do the right thing. You know, we can't have this be sustainable with Saudi Arabia." And now with Syria on top of this, it seems like maybe Graham is broken here, and maybe other Republicans are broken, saying, "Come on, this is." And you know, there's one new incoming congresswoman. Forgive me if I mispronounced her name. The one from Minneapolis, I believe Ilhan Omar. She had a tweet that went that was heavily retweeted, saying to Mattis, "This is your breaking point. You didn't resign over the travel ban. You didn't resign over child separations. You resign over the one time Trump does something that doesn't kill people. This is what makes you quit." And I think there's that sentiment, certainly on the left and maybe on the isolationist right, that this is a good thing for Trump to do. But I think in the mindset of Graham, and probably some Democrats as well, that this is not just a zero-sum game about casualties. What does this say about the hegemony of the world, where you're saying, Putin, you can have this? What is the long-term ramifications of that?
There's so many reasons why this is a horrible idea to pull out of Syria. And look, I would say two things. One, I think when Democrats and liberals, you have Mattis. Mattis is really the first person, in my opinion, who's come the closest to resigning on principle and saying why he resigned, right? So a lot of people have resigned based on Trump's actions, but they've claimed they wanted to just spend more time with their family. Mm-hmm. If Mattis made it very clear that he was resigning because of Syria, because Trump's worldview does not align with his, and I think Mattis should get credit. Instead, we're punishing people for doing the right thing because they didn't do it quick enough for us, or soon enough for us, or at the right time. I think that's counterproductive, but that's the way the world works. I would say this about Syria. I think there's a mistake of conflating. So, I don't think we should be out there trying to, what's the term of art? Spread democracy. Mm-hmm. okay? And I don't think we should be engaging in any sort of naive or quixotic attempts to topple regimes and turn them into Americans, and so I think that that's quixotic and dangerous and has been demonstrated to be a very bad idea. That is an entirely different animal from leaving a few thousand reserve troops behind to maintain order. And again, whether it's to keep the Kurds from being slaughtered, you've got Turkey to worry about, you've got Assad, or whether it's just not to give Putin complete, hegemony over the region. I mean, there's so many reasons why this was a bad idea to retreat from Syria. And I feel like whether it's isolationists on the right or on the left, they were under the impression that, what we were doing in Syria was like tantamount to the Iraq War, or some sort of the Iraq invasion. I mean, it's a very different thing to keep a small residual force, like special forces folks there, we have that all over the world.
Well, again, I think this is going to, we're talking a lot about the fishers on the right. This is potentially a very big moment for the Democratic Party and the left. What's more important? What drives your foreign policy, national security thinking on the left? There is, I would say, a neo-isolationist left that believes American presence in other parts of the world. Who cares what the number is? Who cares what the state objective is? The mere presence in and of itself is an irritant at best, is malevolent at worst, and causes all of these problems of international terrorism. And if we just got out of there, we just got out, mind our own business, we'd be better off. And so if that's your mentality, this is great. Trump's doing what we wished Obama would have done. Now, and if your mentality is not so much, and some of that is just straight up, you're for war or against war. If you're against war, this is part of war. All the other factors are secondary to that. Get out of war. If your mentality is, the world's more complicated than that, and we don't want to have Russia expand its sphere of influence because that's not good for human rights and democracy writ large. And we're not magical spreaders of democracy in the Middle East. We've learned that hard lesson, but it's not necessarily good to cede the field to Russia, because that might have some serious consequences down the line. And it means we're going to have to, I think, ultimately it's going to. So, and by the way, what do we do? Should we get out of South Korea too? Because we're causing. If you're on the new isolationist left or right, you would say absolutely. And Trump wants to. He said very clearly that he wants to, and I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't by the time his next 2 years are up.
I think it's utterly dangerous, and it's amazing that Republicans elected a guy who wants to do these things. And I would argue that in the long run, the jungle grows back. In the long run, retreat means we lose more Americans, because I think history has shown that when we retreat, we end up having to get involved in a much bigger conflict down the road, or maybe it's a safe haven for terrorists who then come here. Whatever the case may be, I don't think we have the luxury. I would love it if we had the luxury of just turning inward and not. We can spread democracy at home or do nation building at home. I love it. I just don't think we live in that. I don't think that's a reality. I think we have to. To some level, be involved. We have to be smart about it. We have to be prudent about it. And I think that this is a mistake. But who hasn't made a lot of mistakes this year, Bill? You.
That's an amazing segue. It's my favorite segue of the year. But I'm going
to. You have a reputation, a well-earned reputation of being a very smart commentator, but some of your predictions over the years have not panned out. I would say this year you have nailed it.
There are two things that I would say that I got very right this year. And one we've gone over a lot, which is the shutdowns. I said in January, I wrote a piece for Politico, shutdowns are for losers. Instigator of the shutdown loses politically. I warned Democrats not to do it. They did it briefly. They realized the error of their ways, and they climbed down. And then I had a follow-up piece saying, the clock on DACA is not ticking. You don't have to give away the store to codify DACA protections because the courts are doing the job for you right now. And there are people at the time who said to me, why are you putting any faith in the judiciary of all places, which the Republicans have controlled? And that prediction has proved out good as well. The courts have maintained DACA, kept it in place all year. And people who are in the program now can reapply for 2-year permits. And we're getting to the point where the next round of permits that you get are going to extend beyond the Trump presidency. So you can wait out the clock. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen in the courts over the next 2 years.
Well, beyond the first term of the Trump presidency.
Right. So you at least have a legitimate hope that if you can run out the clock till the end of 2020, you can win the presidency and then solve the problem on your terms then, which is a much better strategy than shutdowns, which never work. So I was right on that front. And I got hammered in the summer of this year. I wrote a couple of pieces, one that got more attention than the other, pointing out that Ocasio-Cortez's win in the primary was not indicative of a broader socialist revolution within the Democratic Party, that the socialist populist left was not winning most of the primaries, and that they weren't going to have a situation where they would get to prove their point come the general election that a socialist/populist approach to the economy and to politics was the secret to flipping red districts. They didn't have a lot of examples. Those they did have lost in red areas. And the Democrats took the House with, to use phrasing from a socialist or populist, bland, milquetoast, moderate, centrist, bipartisan rhetoric. Those are the people that flip districts in almost every case this cycle. Now that fact has been somewhat obscured by the bravado that Ocasio-Cortez and Rashida Tlaib and others have taken into Congress this year. But we just saw, maybe you missed it. I missed it yesterday. In fact, I only caught it this morning because so much news happened yesterday. Huffington Post ran a story showing that the push for a Green New Deal committee that Ocasio-Cortez has been championing has been diluted. They named a more moderate Congresswoman, Kathy Castor, to spearhead it, and she said it's not going to be in the vision of what Ocasio-Cortez wanted, which is a committee that could only produce a Green New Deal. It could only produce a bill that zeroed out fossil fuels in 10 years. It could not have people who serve on it who've taken any money from fossil fuel interests, and it would invest in renewable fuels with massive federal dollars. So now you're going to have a committee that's about climate change, but it's not going to have those strict parameters so it could debate other ideas and, heaven forfend, talk to people with fossil fuel ties to come up with a compromise that can actually clear all of Congress and get to the president's desk. Obviously not going to be signed by Trump, but at some point down the line. So all the Instagram followers, all of the sound bites, all of the Bernie Sanders town halls, those are not indicative of where the power lies in the party writ large. It's not to say that the socialist populist left hasn't gained an influence. I think they have. I think they absolutely have. But to interpret that and to say they run the party, the evidence isn't there for that. Now, you're going to have a presidential primary starting in January in earnest, where the candidates, by and large, are going to want to appeal to the more leftist parts of the base in a lot of cases, not everybody running, But your electorate in the primary is very different than your electorate in a midterm general election. So people might still think these guys still have the whip hand. But there's a lot of evidence that the more moderate elements of the party are not rolling over. And these tensions are going to continue, I think, in a very big way over the course of the next year or two.
Well, one other thing that you can't say you got the prediction right because it hasn't played out yet, but you were ahead of the curve on this one, was Amy Klobuchar. I believe the day after the midterm elections, you had a big piece at Politico magazine saying, based on what we saw in the midterms, Amy Klobuchar should be, if we're going to extrapolate what worked in the midterms, Amy Klobuchar should be the Democratic nominee.
Well, I didn't go quite that far.
Well, let me puff you up a little bit here, and we better a good story than to get the details exactly right. You can smash cut to like a couple days ago, the New York Times, I think it was the New York Times, had a piece making the exact same case, only a month after you made it.
That is true. What I said was this was literally, 5 a.m. in the morning, 5 hours after most of the races had been called, where I'm banging this out, where I said the moral of the midterm story is Midwestern nice. Midwestern nice won the House for the Democrats. People who it wasn't solely Midwest, but that was the heart of it. People running as pragmatists, as bipartisan. They weren't engaging in culture war. They weren't being incendiary in the rhetoric. They were mostly avoiding Trump by name. And that's the model that won. So if you were to extrapolate from that to a 2020 nominee, you would most likely get to Amy Klobuchar. And so I said she deserved a serious look. I listed a handful of Midwestern possibilities, but I put Klobuchar at the top of that list and said she deserves a serious look now. And I wasn't predicting she was going to get that serious look because I couldn't predict what the base was going to do. But there was an Iowa poll just last week, Klobuchar at 10% in a 1 point behind O'Rourke and a handful of points behind Biden and Bernie. And the way this field is going, that's top tier. Excuse me. That's top tier status.
You probably don't write the headlines or assign the photographs, but that piece was, if one were to just glance at that piece, I think it.
No, they had Klobuchar in the photo there.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it certainly made a strong case for her. But I wasn't going quite on saying she will be the nominee or even she should be the nominee. But I think she definitely deserves that look, and she's going to get that look now because
you were the first person. You were the first person, I think, or the loudest person.
Well, I had to be first. It got published in the morning afterwards.
You were the most prominent person, and the first person to make that case. And by the way, I've strongly pushed back against that.
Well, you're a Beto man. But the fact that
Beto male,
the fact that she is getting that look, that she did jump up in the Iowa polls, or at least one poll, is more evidence that don't think you know what the Democratic base is. Don't assume it's a monolith. Don't assume it's all socialists. It's all populists. There are a lot of.
There's also communists in there. There's communists. There are authoritarians in there. It is a diverse crowd.
It is the Democratic base, particularly in a primary. Which look, it's not just Iowa caucus goers. It's also South Carolina primary voters and Mississippi primary voters and Utah caucus voters and Pennsylvania primary voters. And
then we're going to North Dakota.
Right. Look, you have divisions by race, by gender, by class, by geography. It's much more complex. We should have learned this by now after what Obama and Clinton went through in 2008 and what Clinton and Sanders went through in 2016. It's not a monolithic base. So don't assume that people who are running against the grain of the Sanders populists have no chance. just to circle back to the Syria question, Hillary and Sanders had a foreign policy debate in 2016, and Hillary was touted as a hawk, and she didn't really run away from that. I mean, she was not ashamed of being forced. She was obviously not embracing the Iraq war, but she wasn't opposed to military intervention on humanitarian grounds. And even Barack Obama in 2008, even though he was clearly anti-Iraq and wanted diplomacy with Iran, North Korea, he also was very aggressive about Al-Qaeda in the primary of 2008, which he then followed through on as president. There has always been a strain of the Democratic Party, a dominant strain of the Democratic Party, that is for humanitarian interventions. And I would not be surprised to see some people carrying that banner in the wake of things like Syria and saying, you know what? It's not good enough just to say we're going to pull out everywhere. The world's more complicated than that. That is part of the party.
Where's Tulsi Gabbard? Tulsi Gabbard. Where's she? Where's Tulsi?
Well, she's definitely neo-isolationist left. I mean, she is exactly the kind of person.
Is she running? She's
talking about it. I mean, she went to New Hampshire not too long ago. She said in New Hampshire she's seriously considering it. And I assume if you say you're seriously considering it, you're probably going to do it. And this is the kind of person where you might say there's no way she wins. She was meeting with Assad. It's totally ridiculous. There's even people that say she's anti-Muslim, that she's not a true progressive. But that strain of the party, that hardcore neo-isolationist leftist strain of the party, they have liked Tulsi for a long time. There's been Run Tulsi Run. There's been a Run Tulsi Run website lasting since 2017. I've seen Tulsi 2020 caps in my neck of the woods here for a while now. Not a lot of them, but I've seen some. So if she runs, she most likely forces debate on these subjects. Whether or not she's the nominee, obviously her role in Syria is going to come up. She's going to defend her position, and that puts a pressure on other Democrats to say, do you agree with Tulsi that we should pull out of Syria? Assuming that's what she's going to say, which I haven't seen it, but I would assume that. Are you going to agree with that? Or are you going to probably be like Joe Biden and be like, this is ridiculous. The world is more complicated than that, and we need to be engaged on terrorism. We need to not give away the story to Putin. That debate's most likely going to happen. And don't assume what the outcome's going to be.
Right. And so the interesting thing is, like, both parties, both ideologies are having riffs over fundamental, serious philosophical worldview questions right now.
If you're interested in my talk at Williams College, which is on YouTube somewhere, this is exactly my point to what I was saying to the next generation. Both parties are in flux. Both parties are going through a realignment or a reassessment of their priorities that has been sparked or catalyzed by Trump. And it's an open question where both parties land. And the presidential primary process for Democrats is going to play a big role in that. How Republicans react to Trump now plays a big part in that. And if you are a young person, in your generation, you should think about our generation plays a role in this. We're a cohort of people entering a party. We can determine which direction this party goes in, because it's not fixed. It's not fixed at all.
That's right. So if you are a supporter of Assad, this is your moment. You're okay with chemical warfare. You like optometrists. I don't know. You've got multiple reasons for being for the guy. He's got a cool mustache. I don't know. It doesn't matter. You can pick either part.
To be more charitable, if you believe in your heart that that American intervention abroad hurts more than it helps, and that the world's a messy place, and if some other guy does bad things, it's not our problem. This is your moment to say, you should say, I agree with what Trump did, and if that's going to be the dominant strain of the Republican Party, then perhaps you should be a Republican.
Tulsi Gabbard, Rand Paul, 2020. You heard it here first.
All right, sir. Anything you got right this year you want to brag about?
No, I don't think I got much right. No, I don't really keep score on good or bad. I had a weird, I had a weird column where I said something like just about a month ago. I had a weird column where I said Trump, it was right after the midterms, right? So it's obvious that suburban soccer moms are a problem. Mm-hmm. And I said Trump should think about getting rid of Mike Pence and bringing in Nikki Haley as his running mate, which is not an unprecedented move, but it hasn't happened since like FDR, I think, maybe.
Yeah, FDR changed him every term, I think.
Yeah. Anyway, and then smash cut to 3 days later when the New York Times reported that there are rumblings within the White House that Trump is being pressured is the wrong word, but is advised to dump Mike Pence in favor of Nikki Haley. So that's not like a big thing I got right.
Well, you're right. You should have paid attention to the suburbs a lot more.
Yeah. And so anyway, I would say, first I'll say, I think when history looks back, and I'm sure that this is going to be a national conversation about this when I die, when history looks back and says, what kind of year did Matt Lewis have in 2018? I think probably the parts that I'll be dead, that my children will be least proud of are the moments where I've said good things about Donald Trump. Now, this speaks to my philosophy as an opinion journalist, where I've really tried to judge things fairly and to give credit where it's due. So if Trump did something that I liked, like get a conservative judge, I tried to say that was good. And if the left did things that I thought were mob-like, I tried to be honest about that and call that a mob. And the problem with that is, if you believe that Donald Trump is this huge existential threat, then anything that deviates from that message or is dissonant from that is actually hurting the cause. And so I don't know, but I'll ask you, Bill. You've done a good job, I think, of figuring out what triggers me, and I think it's political correctness. Can you think of anything? I know this is not your responsibility, but can you think of anything that I particularly was right or wrong about this year?
I don't know if I can say this definitively yet.
Okay.
But you were always a Brett Kavanaugh skeptic. Before all the allegations of sexual misconduct came out, you were never. What's that?
I'm joking. I'm joking about the irony. Yeah. That I've probably become more pro Kavanaugh after the scandal.
Right. But your initial take.
What? I'm sorry. I don't want to interrupt you complimenting me. So go ahead.
Your initial take was that he wasn't the most conservative choice. That he should have picked Amy Barrett. They did the safe thing, and that might have been the wrong call. And we don't know exactly how Kavanaugh's going to be as a judge going forward, but that one of his first votes, siding with Planned Parenthood, along with John Roberts, and this was about a law that was designed to defund them. And if I understand correctly, it wasn't upholding a Roe v. Wade. It was, you can't have a bill of attainder that singles out a single operation in a law. That's not constitutional. So he was functioning as a basically responsible justice. This is what him and Roberts say they're going to be: balls and strikes, in or out, constitutional, not constitutional. It was a ruling like that. If he functions more like that over time, perhaps Matt Lewis's initial skepticism will have been borne out to be correct.
Well, I will say Ben Shapiro was against John Roberts like from day one, and that turned out to be very prophetic. And I mean, I'm not a constitutional scholar, but and I'm sure there may have been some, but John Roberts was like a Federalist Society guy, and he was kind of blessed by the conservative movement and the judicial legal, the conservative legal community, and Ben Shapiro was the one guy that I remember at the time warning about John Roberts, and it may be that that Kavanaugh goes down that path.
And so. It wouldn't be totally shocking. I mean, I have no expectation they're going to be suitors. You know, they're not going to like join the liberal wing of the court. But there is a sense that Roberts has been moving towards a more incrementalist approach to the Constitution and reform of the judiciary, where he doesn't want to do a hard right swerve. He's expressed active concern about polarization of American society and the judiciary being part of that. So he lashed out at Trump saying there are no Obama judges and Trump judges. You know, we're all just judges doing our best. And ruling narrowly, even when they are conservative ruling, so they don't abruptly alter the fabric of the country, would be in line with a attitude that says, I don't want the Supreme Court to contribute to the division of American society on my watch. I don't want the Roberts legacy being the court that plunged America into deep division. And if he has a wingman in Brett Kavanaugh now, the question would be, without Kennedy, would Roberts move into that role and become more of a swing than he had been because there's no one else to do it to maintain that balance? If he's got a partner in that, it makes it even easier to do that. I mean, this is one rule, so you don't over extrapolate, but that possibility exists.
I'm sympathetic of someone who wants to defend the institution, but the last guy to prioritize defending his institution over doing acting according to the rule of law or according to plan was James Comey, who I think we are a lot of the reason where we are today is because James Comey prioritized defending our institutions over acting as if this is another case. This is how we treat these cases. This is our proper procedure. This is what we do. And we are where we are. Let me plug something real quick.
Okay.
I just did a podcast with our close friend and colleague, David Petrusha, where we talked about the Christmas truces of World War I. So if you've had enough of the rank punditry and the shutdown acrimony, and you were looking for a safe haven, something that maybe a little bit of history, maybe something a little positive even, to bring a little hope to mankind, to humankind, check out that podcast, Matt Lewis and the News, and we talk about Christmas movies and stuff like that as well, but we get into the World War I Christmas truces.
I will have a new Books and Politics podcast up, I believe, early next week. It's in the can. For those who find me a neoliberal corporatist stooge, you will not believe this podcast. This is with George Lakey, who is a legendary community organizer, progressive activist. He's been doing it for 7 decades, and he has poured his experience into a book called How We Win.
Wow.
And so we had a very deep conversation about what tactics work and what tactics don't work. And this is not a guy coming from my awful pragmatist perspective.
Does he know Saul Alinsky?
He did know Saul. He did, and we talked about that. And he's not.
I'm going to listen to this one.
And he's not.
I listen to all your podcasts, obviously, but I'm going to listen to this one twice.
You will enjoy it. I mean, obviously, it's not what you would normally listen to, but I think you find it an enjoyable podcast.
Is this out? Is this out now, or is it coming out?
I don't think it's check newbooksnetwork.com. I don't think it went up today. I think it's going to probably go up Monday.
In the new year, when you pivot over to the Matt Lewis and the News Empire with your podcast, we're going to make sure they go up right away. There won't be any waiting around. But that's in the new year. I'm going to have my agents talk to yours. So.
Well, if I don't talk to you before Christmas and the New Year, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Merry Christmas and a Happy Hanukkah to you and yours, your family, your lovely young family, and to all of the people out there who support us. We honestly, I was going to say we couldn't do it without you, but actually we probably would. I don't know we get much out of this.
Yeah,
but
you don't give us any money. You don't give us any ratings.
You should rate and review. We have a podcast, an audio podcast, and they should rate and review us on that.
That's true. You could do that.
DMZ
you could at least do that for us, for Pete's sake.
That costs nothing. And all it does is help other people find us. So do that. Happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. We won't be. Will it be the New Year when we're back?
It'll be the New Year. Wednesday's the 2nd, so we'll have to tape Wednesday or Thursday. See if the government's open by then.
Well, it's been a fascinating year. Bill, what can I say, man? We've been doing this for a long time. It's a pleasure. Another great year. Thank you for all you do. God bless.
You too, sir. And we'll talk in the new year.
You got it.
Take care.